half-hour fellowship together here through the live stream media platform that we have here at Calvary Lake Stevens. Last week I came and just began the lesson, and I was in not very good condition, and so I excused myself from the session. I was going through a bit of illness, have been actually for many weeks now, and told you I'd see you today in a week, and here we are. We're ready to go, and I think I'm ready to make it through the Bible study. I'm excited about it. And I want to thank you for your prayers. I had many people contact me by text or messaging, and it's really great to know that people are praying for you. So thank you. I'm just going through this treatment for this type 2 diabetes that I have. My doc prescribed me this medication that lowers the blood sugars, and it affected my body severely, actually. So I'm looking forward to getting back to my old self. But I want to thank you for your prayers and to let you know the strategies that the doc had to lower my blood sugars have worked. My A1C count when I began this whole treatment was in the tens. If you know anything about measurement of A1C blood sugar over a 3-month period, I was in the tens, and now I'm in the sixes. It lowered over 3 points, almost 3.5 points. It's really quite a blessing. But it was pretty severe, and I've not quite come back from it. In fact, we're beginning today in Daniel chapter 10, and Daniel had a vision from the Lord, and after his vision, it says, Daniel 10 verse 8, I was left alone after this great vision, and had no strength left in me. My natural color turned to deathly pallor, and I retained no strength. And I fell into a deep sleep on my face. I can kind of relate to that. There are times when you're just ill, you're down for the count, and you just gotta rest. Like my wife has been telling me, you just need to rest. It's really great. Anyway, I'm back here with you, and I'm on the mend, I believe, and we have a great lesson today. We're going to finish up the book of Daniel. Today we do chapter 10 and chapter 12. They seem to go together. In the book of Daniel, you have the first 4 chapters where it covered a time when Daniel was in the court of Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon. And then he slid over into the court of Belshazzar and served Belshazzar, and that total time of Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, who is a relative of Nebuchadnezzar's, it was probably about 40, 50 years. We don't know exact, but it's probably within that range. Then after Belshazzar, then he entered the service of the Median king, the beginnings of the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Median king was Darius, and we have his the detail of Daniel's service with Darius in chapter 6, and also in chapter 8. 7 and 8 were for Belshazzar, and chapter 9 was Darius, so chapter 6 and chapter 9. And then today chapter 11 also was for Darius. We went through that 2 weeks back when I was still up and around. And today we do chapter 10 and 12, which seems like a time when Daniel was in the service of Cyrus, king of Persia. So when the Medo-Persian Empire began, it was Darius the Mede, and then it was Cyrus, king of Persia, according to Daniel's writings here. And so we see him in chapter 10, and it says, in the 3rd year of Cyrus, king of Persia, a message was revealed to Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, back from Babylonian days. And the message, chapter 10, verse 1, was one that was true and one of great conflict. It says a very similar thing in chapter 12. It was a time, chapter 12, verse 1, there will be a time of distress, such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. So, great conflict in a time of distress. We have Daniel's writing here in chapter 10 and chapter 12. It was during the rule of Cyrus, king of Persia, and he was serving in the court of the king. He was a part of the inner circle of he was a bureaucrat. His entire adult career was serving as a politician, really. And it says in chapter 10, verse 1, in the latter part of that verse, that he had a message that was part of a vision that he had. And in those days, I, Daniel, had been mourning for 3 entire weeks. I didn't eat any tasty food, nor did meat or wine enter my mouth, nor did I use any ointment at all, just to clean up. And I didn't until the end of the entire 3 weeks were completed, on the 24th day of the 1st month. While I was by the banks of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes, and behold, there was a certain man dressed in linen, whose waist was girded with a belt of pure gold of Uphaz. His body was also like beryl. His face was like the appearance of lightning. His eyes were like a flaming torch. His arms and feet were like the gleam of polished bronze. And the sound of his words were like the sounds of a tumult. And I, Daniel, was alone, saw the vision. The men who were with me did not see the vision. Nevertheless, a great dread fell upon them, and they ran away to hide themselves. So I was left alone and saw this great vision. And again, no strength was left in him. He was just all pooped out, and he fell into a deep sleep with his face to the ground. So Daniel had a vision. Remember I told you when we first started Daniel, he was a man of prayer, a man of principle, a man of prophecy, which is what we're seeing here. Prophecy, seeing things in the future, and a man with pastoral care. And we saw him taking care, especially with Darius, the Median emperor. But he also cared for Cyrus as well, I think. And anyway, here we see him having a vision. And it's a vision from Jesus. We know it's Jesus because in the verses 5, 6, bleeding into 7 there, you see a description of Jesus that you also get described in Revelation chapter 1, when John gave a description of, he went up to the throne room and he saw a vision of Jesus there. It was very similar in description in Daniel 1, verse 13, 14, and 15. And also, one of the things that's important to note about this description of Jesus, verse 5, it says he was dressed in linen. Over in chapter 12, if you look there for a second, we see this man who is dressed in linen. Daniel 12, verse 6. He was there dressed in linen, and then verse 7, I heard the man dressed in linen who is above the waters as he raised his right hand and his left toward the heaven, and he spoke. And of course his speaking was described for us in chapter 10, that he had the voice, the sound of his words, verse 6, were like the sound of a tumult. This tumult was a very enlarged, very amplified, very majestic kind of speaking. So Jesus has given Daniel this vision in chapter 10 and chapter 12. Daniel was having his devotion time. He went down to the river, which I always enjoy, getting away, driving to a place by the river or by the sound. We have the Puget Sound here in the Seattle area. Anytime I can get next to water, it's a great place, I think, to have devotions. And he had an experience with Jesus there. And he also sees in chapter 12, we eventually see Jesus, the man in linen, not on one side of the river or the other side, but floating above the river. Verse 6, verse 7, he's just kind of hanging out, floating in the air above the river. We see two other men. These would be angelic fellows. Daniel 12, verse 5. Two others were standing, one on this bank of the river and the other on that bank of the river. I just find this exciting. Whenever I go to have devotions down by the water, I'm looking for visions of angels. Anyway, Daniel, he's having this experience of so tense and intense that it knocked him out. He just ended up sleeping, taking a nap, which is what I'll be doing after I go home today. Last week, when I went home after I announced I was going to skip, I slept for 3 hours. not 21 days. Anyway, Daniel, he's having this vision, and he's having intense prayer during this time and fasting. He didn't eat tasty food. He just felt like he wanted to spend time with God. But it lasted this whole time, 24 days, when then he saw a vision of Jesus, and then he hit the deck and fell asleep. Verse 10, another angel came and touched him. And I'm in chapter 10, verse 10. Behold, the hand touched me and set me trembling on my hands and knees, and said to me, O Daniel, man of high esteem, understand the words that I'm about to tell you, and stand upright, for I have now been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling, and he said, do not be afraid, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart on understanding this and humbling yourself before your God, your words were heard. I have come in response to your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was withstanding me for 21 days. And then behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, we call him an archangel. We see him in Revelation, one of the angels who's fierce, waging war. He came to me, and I had been left there with the kings of Persia. And now I have come to you, an understanding of this matter, what will happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision pertains to the days yet future. We'll see today that this vision that Daniel got here in chapter 10, chapter 12, was a vision that had to do for latter days, days yet future. We're going to hear the phrase end time or end of times. It's end times prophecy, and it has to do with just before the coming of Jesus Christ, the second coming. His first coming, he came as a suffering servant to accomplish salvation by hanging on the cross for our sins. It's a beautiful first coming. Second coming is going to be what everybody was expecting from the Messiah, a conquering king. And he will come, and he will conquer. And we will come with him from heaven. That's in Revelation, and we're not doing that study now. We're doing Daniel. But Daniel and Revelation, they dovetail together in so many ways. So anyway, here's Daniel being comforted, encouraged by this angel saying, hey, I came to talk to you, but I was withstood by the king of Persia, who is seen as the devil himself, I think. Satan, who opposes the forces of heaven, the angelic forces that God sends along to help us, his people. We had the king of Persia, and there's other scriptures I can take you to show you that he is symbolic of the devil. He's a bad guy. And it is interesting that right now one of the bad guys on the surface of the earth is the king of Persia, the leader of Iran. We've had the Shah of Iran that the United States has been in league with for a long time. He's out of the picture now, but still Iran is a bad guy on the earth. And he withholds God's program and God's desire. So there was this battle behind the scenes that is going to elude the clarity with which this vision will bring a description of end times prophecy. What will happen before the second coming of Christ? And so the angel came and he touched his lips, verse 16, and he, which is symbolic of cleansing his mouth. And that's what the Lord does with us. He cleanses our lips so that we can speak for him. And yet he retained no strength. And he said, how can such a servant of my Lord talk with such as my Lord? For me, as for me, there just now remains no strength in me. There's not been any breath in me. Then the one with human appearance, the angelic guy, touched me again and strengthened me. And he said to me, man of high esteem, do not be afraid. Peace be with you. Take courage. Be courageous. As soon as he spoke to me, I received strength. That's what happens when you're having devotions. You see things for the future, and it lays you out, and then you get angel strength. He comes and comforts you and encourages you, and maybe like in the Old Testament with Elijah, gave him some angel food cake and strengthened him. Do you ever just feel kind of no strength and you need something to eat but you're not hungry? He'll give you some strength food. And I say that because I experienced that here these many weeks. I'm not feeling that great. And he said to Daniel, do you understand why I came to you? And I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. I'm going forth, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. However, I will tell you what is inscribed in the writing of truth. And there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except for Michael your prince. So it's angelic fellows explaining to Daniel what's going to happen in the future. Now, chapter 11 is about Darius the Mede. We went over that. Turn over to chapter 12. At that time, Michael, the great prince, who stands guard over the sons of your people, he will arise, and there will be a time of distress such as never has occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. In Revelation, it's called the Lamb's Book of Life. It's really sweet. It's the Jesus book. And many of those who are asleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting, the others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. So Daniel 12 verse 2 has to do with the bodily resurrection of the saints and the disembodied spirits who died. And I can just tell you, I've sought commentary understanding for this all over the place, and there's not a lot written or not a lot understood about the bodily resurrection. We just know this. It says in the New Testament, to be absent in body is to be present with the Lord. And when you die, you go to be with Jesus. How that happens with the bodily resurrection of all the saints, I'm uncertain. I can't really describe it to you. I feel embarrassed maybe to say that, but that's how it goes. Smarter the people than me have tried to make understanding of it. It's really tough to know. Anyway, he says that after verse 2, it says that those who have insight will shine brightly like brightness of the expanse of the heaven, and those who lead many to righteousness will be like the stars forever and ever. Verse 3, I think, is all about once we have the gospel, we have insight, we have the light of the world. Jesus said, we are the light of the world. We bring the knowledge of salvation and the gospel to people. And so verse 3, that's us. All of us who've seen Jesus and received the gospel. But as for you, Daniel, verse 4, conceal these words, seal up the book till the end of time. Many will go back and forth, knowledge will increase. A lot has been said about that. I'm not going to take time for it, but knowledge will run to and fro on the earth. That's the time we live in right now. And every one of you have one of these apparatuses, these knowledge gainers. They bring to you knowledge that increased. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, the two others were standing, one on this side of the bank, the other on that side, and the one said to the man dressed in linen, and this is Jesus, who is above the waters of the river, how long will it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man dressed in linen above the waters, as he raised his right hand and his left toward heaven. That's the way we're supposed to worship. Jesus, there he is worshiping the God of heaven. And he said, he swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time. Time, times, and a half a time is a description of 3.5 times, or 3.5 years. It's repeated. We saw it at first in Daniel, the 7th chapter. We see it here in the 12th chapter. We see it all over the place in Daniel, chapter 11, 12, 13. It shows a period of 3.5 times, 3.5 years. It's even broken down into 2 sections of 1,260 days. If you use the Babylonian calendar of 360 days a year, that's 3.5 years. Down here in Daniel 12, it's a little bit more than 360 days. I'm not sure why. Nobody really does. I've looked around. But Jesus said it'll last for a time, and half a time. And that's the time when it says in Revelation that the Antichrist will rule on the earth. And he said to Daniel, who had said, Lord, what's the outcome of these events? Verse 9, he said, go your way, Daniel, for these words are concealed, sealed up till the end of time. Many will be purged, purified, refined, but the wicked will act wickedly. None of them will understand. From that time, the regular sacrifice is abolished. The abomination of desolation is set up. There will be 1,290 days. So we know this from the book of Revelation. The 2 witnesses will be on the Temple Mount ruling for 3.5 years. Then the Antichrist will create the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, prophesied by Jesus in Matthew 24. And then he will rule for this 3.5 years. And Jesus tells Daniel, just remember, these are sealed up for the end of time. And so we know that the last days, days yet future, the end time, end of times, last days scriptures, just before Jesus comes, there's going to be this abomination of desolation, something that we will see happen. And then Jesus comes. It's marvelous.